Welcome to the Forever in Their Hearts podcast with Dale Martin Jr., brought to you by Martin Brothers, providing funerals designed and customized to be as special as your loved one lost. Now, here's your host.
Well, yes, this is your host, Erik Reynolds, and I'm back again today with Valerie Martell, Director of Operations for Martin Brothers Funeral Services. And today, Valerie will talk about presenting meaningful eulogies, slideshows, and other tributes that capture the essence of the deceased. Now, before Valerie joins us, just a reminder that if you have questions or require assistance, you can reach out to Martin Brothers Funeral Services in Vancouver at 778-330-7799. Again, that's 778-330-7799. Well, Valerie, it's great to be talking with you again today.
Nice to talk to you, Erik.
You know, and I've been asked to do the eulogy for an old friend passed away not too long ago. Let me ask you this question. Where do I start?
Well, first off, sit down and start thinking about that friend of yours. Think of things like the way that person made you feel, and think of the times that you laughed or the experiences that you had, things your friend might have said or did or described. It's one thing to say that someone was a good person. You can say that in a eulogy, of course, or you can say that they were funny or they were thoughtful, but it'll really stick with people if you talk about the occasions when your friend was good or when your friend was funny or thoughtful or whatever it is. Another thing you can do is take out old photos. You can take out photos or notes or letters, even gifts that friend gave you. When you have a mental block, sometimes it's the stuff that will spur a memory. So a look at the photo, a memory of when your friend gave you a certain gift. That'll spur the memories in you. The other thing you can do, Erik, is you can talk to other people. Send out an email to the entire group of your friends that you were common friends with and have them give you a descriptor word. That's a really good way to start. Or even a story or an object that reminds them of that friend. These will spur some stories or memories with you. But most of all, you have to trust. Trust that you'll have enough to work with. You knew your friend well, as did most people who are going to attend the service. So really feed off of that. That's an important thing.
Well, now, Valerie, first of all, thanks for the advice. That's really helpful. And, I have my rough notes and stories and, those kind of things. But how do I begin to put all this together?
Well, it's usually best to establish your background with the deceased. Not everyone in the crowd is going to know who you are in relation to that person and what connection you had with the deceased. So it may be an idea to let them know how you met, where you met, and how you fit into each other's lives. Now you can start telling the stories. You can pick a few that were really, that really say something about your friend. Since the eulogy is about your friend, one thing to watch is that even though you probably are a part of all these stories, you're not telling stories about yourself, but rather about your friend. So you may wish to pick 3 or 4 stories that best illustrate who that friend was. Certainly it's okay to have funny and amusing stories, and it's okay to have poignant or touching ones as well. And, you might save those touching ones for, just before the wrap-up, since they might be the most difficult to tell. Remember that if your friend had a spouse or significant other or children or whatever it is, you should incorporate them into the eulogy as well. If you're not that close to the family, you might simply and sincerely say how much you'll miss your friend and publicly offer the family your support. Another thing, think about how you're going to finish off the eulogy. Finish it off with something that'll really stick with people. A eulogy doesn't have to be long to be good, and some of the best eulogies are really delivered in a fairly short amount of time. But once you've written it, it's a good idea to write it, Set it aside. Don't even look at it. Give yourself the luxury of starting early enough, but if you have that time. But, do that. Write it up, set it aside, and leave it alone. And then after a pause of, if you've got a day luxury, that's good. If you have a few hours, that's great. Go back, reread it. Make sure that you've said everything you wanted to say and you haven't left anything out. And, you can revise as needed. And the other thing to remember is that it doesn't all have to be written down. You might start speaking it and you might realize that you want to say something and you can go ahead and say that. No one expects you, certainly you shouldn't read from paper the whole time, but, if something comes up in your mind, it's okay to add that during the eulogy by all means.
Now, you brought up a really good point, is that, talk about some of the good times and the memories that we share, but that are about him. But between you and I guess all the listeners, my friend wasn't always a saint, so to speak. So what kind of things should I say, and, for himself and for his family and for those attending, what should I avoid?
Well, sometimes things don't have to be said. If something is going to cause the family further grief, then perhaps it's best left out of the eulogy. So, for the most part, if a person had some part of their life that was not so stellar, so to speak, the people attending the memorial already know about it. So it's really not worth mentioning. However, on the flip side of all that, it's not a good idea to paint someone with a completely rosy brush if that isn't the true color for them. So, for instance, someone who may have left his or her children behind and, didn't participate in the raising of children, for instance, and they have children, shouldn't be described as the mother or father of the year. It may be a part of that person's life that you simply choose not to mention. Not everything has to be said, and not everything has to be, that person was the perfect at everything, because, none of us are. So that's fine. Leave it out. Or if you need to mention something, you might mention it in a bit of a funny light instead of really coming down hard on somebody.
Well, and I think I've got it all written, the things I think I want to say. But, it's a really touching, it's a really personal experience. So how do I get through it actually speaking it at the funeral?
Well, first off, Erik, no one's going to expect you to be the most amazing orator. That's, the first thing. It's an emotional time, and it's emotional for everybody, but it's very much natural to feel those emotions when you're talking about someone you've lost. So it's a good idea to find out from the person who's running the funeral when in the service your eulogy is going to be delivered. And that way, you can actually be present for the rest of the service. You can take part in it emotionally. You can listen to what's going on without having to worry that you're going to be the next one called up to speak. So you'll know when you're going to be going up. So you can prepare right before that. And you don't have to think, oh, am I next? So talk to the person who's running the service beforehand. Either talk to the funeral director or talk to the, clergy or other person who's running the service. And then when you're actually summoned to go to the front to start your eulogy, take your time getting up there. This will give you a chance to breathe and collect yourself. And, while you're speaking, take your time. If you need to pause, that's perfectly fine. And in reality, if you're unable to continue, most clergy or MCs or somebody running the service, they'll have the ability to take over for you from your notes. So, check with them beforehand, double check that, but they can certainly do that. At the end of it, just be proud that you did it and that you had the opportunity to honor the life of your friend. And that's really what everyone will remember. They won't remember your pauses or your missteps or whatever it is. If that happens, what they'll remember is those stories.
Now, Valerie, eulogies aside, what if I'm asked to contribute, and actually I have been asked to contribute to a slideshow or maybe some other kind of tribute? What can I expect?
Well, if you're asked to contribute to a slideshow, find out from the people who are actually putting it together approximately how many photos that they want from you. And then choose the photos that show who your loved one was. Don't be offended, though, if all your photos don't make it to the slideshow. Often it's a matter of choosing from a great deal more photos than what can be actually shown in that limited amount of time. But, choose those photos of those experiences. You'll have experiences that, with that person. And, often the beauty of slideshows in a service. The beauty of them is that, they really spur those stories about a person. You'll see a picture of you guys at the lake one summer, and, that spurs 100 stories, and it spurs stories amongst all of the people that are there. And so, so choose those pictures that really illustrate those times in your life. And, if you're asked to contribute to any other kind of tribute, it's much like a eulogy. If you have a special story about your friend, share that. If you have a special item that maybe your friend gave you, or maybe something that is from something you did together, often it's important to have those things at the service. So, you can ask, are you having a display of items? And you can bring some of those things. And that's what you can do to contribute other than a eulogy.
Now, Valerie, I appreciate the information, the advice. Before we go today, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I do, Eric. What a funeral or memorial is all about is it's all about bringing together those people from a person's life that were important to the person who has died. And you know what? You don't all have memories of the deceased, experiences with the deceased that are common. So the interesting part of a memorial or a funeral is you're bringing together all those people from all those different facets of that person's life. And really what you're doing is completing that picture. Your loved one is gone, but all of their memories live on in all these different people, and it's so important for the key family, the wife or the husband or the children, if they've got that in their family, or the parents of the deceased. It's so important to pull all that together and really get from all of those support people around, you get kind of that complete picture. It's closure. It's putting that final stamp on that person's life. And so, whatever you can bring to that is valuable, and that's really what you need to remember.
Well, Valerie, I really thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas with us today. And for myself and the listeners, I really think this will help give folks ideas on the kind of tributes that they can have. Now, for the listeners, if you can think of someone who might benefit from what we've covered today, do me a favor and do them a favor and forward this episode on to them. And of course, if you have questions or you require assistance, reach out to Martin Brothers Funeral Services in Vancouver at 778-330-7799. Again, that's 778-330-7799, or visit their website. We've mentioned it several times in the episodes. It's a wonderful website at www.mbfunerals.com. Again, that's www.mbfunerals.com. Well, Valerie, as always, for myself, for the listeners, thanks so much for the conversation today.
Thanks, Eric.
You've been listening to the Forever in Their Hearts podcast with Dale Martin Jr. from Martin Brothers Funeral Services. Our 4 generations of service in the funeral profession have equipped us with a legacy of understanding. In your hour of need, Martin Brothers is there. Call Martin Brothers in Vancouver today at 778-330-7799 and visit them online at www.mbfunerals.com.